This is Japan. This is also Japan.
Drop it.
What a lot of people don't know is that Japan's nightlife can get pretty crazy sometimes. You got muscle mommy bars, muscle men bars, a bar that's themed after the female anatomy, and a bar themed all around the American state of Texas, for some reason. But amongst all the bizarre gimmicky nightlife Japan has, there's one that sticks out the most because of how tame it is. They're called host clubs, a type of nightclub in Japan where you go to and pay just to hang out with the opposite gender. No, I'm being serious. And you might say, isn't that just a normal nightclub? And yeah, but at host clubs, you literally pay money just to sit there while someone of the opposite gender talks with you and gives you attention. And some people in Japan have spent crazy amounts of money to the point of ending up in debt just to go to these clubs and talk with their favorite worker there. And before you assume this is just another case of Japan being weirdly parasocial, just know that plenty of host and hostess clubs have been involved in criminal cases that range from emotional exploitation and debt trapping to straight up human trafficking and forced prostitution. For a business that's all about just sitting around and talking with each other, it is the furthest thing from clean. So what's the deal, right? What are host clubs exactly, and how can a business that's centered around just hanging out lead to some pretty messed up stuff? And the answer to that is a lot more complicated than you think. But what isn't complicated is how you can get authentic snacks and food from Japan through the sponsor of today's video, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. are a monthly snack box service that sends authentic Japanese snacks and food right to your doorstep. And if you're like me and you grew up wanting to try the snacks or food that you saw in your favorite anime or manga, this is a really convenient way to do that. They come absolutely packed with all sorts of snacks from Japan. As you can see, I am struggling to frame the shot because I was afraid the food would fall out because, like I said, these things are absolutely packed with snacks. And if you're even more like me and you have certain dietary restrictions, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co boxes do come with these handy booklets that not only tell you about the super cool people that make these snacks, but also what goes into them. For example, I'm actually a huge fan of rice cakes and rice snacks in general. An Asian loving rice related food stuff. Shocking, I know. So color me disappointed when I did find out that these rice crackers did contain trace elements of gelatin according to the booklet. But what was okay for me to eat though was this plum zarame senbei, which I had no idea what a senbei was before this, but after trying it, I can safely say it was pretty good and gelatin free, so it was completely okay for me to eat. The mochi that also came in one of the boxes was also gelatin free, so I managed to finally achieve my dream of eating an authentic Japanese mochi snack. So yeah, if you have dietary restrictions like me, these small booklets are a literal lifesaver. Another cool thing is that each box is themed, and this month's box is themed after the Sakura Moonlight Festival, which is a real thing in Japan apparently, to not just watch the sakura bloom during the day, but also at night because it's like 10 times more aesthetic. So all the snacks are appropriately pink and appropriately bite-sized for you to hang out under the nighttime sky beneath the sakura trees. So if you want to treat yourself or someone you know, you can do so by using my link in the description or in the pinned comment below and use my code Muxedo and get $5 off your first order. Thanks again to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co for sponsoring this video. Now back to telling you how deep the rabbit hole for host clubs can get.
からしたら僕たちは商品なんですよ。ホストって何って言われたら大体こう夢を売る仕事ってみんな言うんですよ。現実じゃない恋愛をするっていうの。
So, I know what you're thinking. Wait, so it's a type of nightclub where people just sit around and talk to each other while getting plastered? And yeah, that's basically it. Okay, not really, but the idea is almost there. Because you gotta know that Japan has kind of built an industry around non-explicit physical services like this for a very long time. A really good historical example of this is the geisha. Something that you've probably seen in both a lot of Japanese media, as well as a crap ton of ads about traveling to Japan. Even if you've never cared for Japan in your life, you've definitely seen one of those commercials before. And the pop culture misunderstanding about geishas is that they were some kind of women of the night, the medieval Japanese equivalent of a prostitute. But geishas historically were more like hired entertainers. They would sing songs to whoever could afford them. They would do traditional dances and recite the popular poetry of the age. They were trained to be witty and hold engaging conversations with whatever samurai lord or rich merchant that hired them. What I'm trying to say is, Japan historically is not a stranger to the concept of paid social entertainment. So the idea of paying someone to have a conversation with you isn't really something new over there. And before someone thinks I'm saying that that host clubs are the descendants of geisha. No, I'm just saying that their industries in terms of purpose are somewhat similar. Because host and hostess clubs kind of fulfill a specific niche that normal adult nighttime industries couldn't, which is to make you feel good emotionally. Imagine spending hundreds of dollars, not on physical pleasure, but emotional pleasure, where the geisha would sing and recite poetry and draw you in by being this refined figure of elegance and art. Host clubs draw you in by appealing to you as a person. They ply you with drinks, listen to your bad jokes, they touch you playfully, but never over the line of harassment. They tell you how you're absolutely beautiful and how they've never met a person as interesting as you before. And again, pretty much all of this is non-sexual. The point of host and hostess clubs is the ambiance of intimacy rather than the act of it. And allegedly, I found this out from random comments from articles that talked about hostess clubs. AAA video essay research, I know, to rely on some random comments.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
But they said that some of the people working at these clubs would even read up from the local newspapers about the going-ons of local Japanese politics or whatever news that their client is interested in. Not because they themselves are into it, but because it allows them to talk more deeply with their clients. But this isn't out of altruism or sincere affectionate care for the client though. Most hosts and hostesses in Japan make their money through tips and commissions based off of how much alcohol they sell. So they're really incentivized to give you good time because the longer you spend there and the more you spend there, the more they make. As Anne Allison said in her book, Night Work, Sexuality, Pleasure, and Corporate Masculinity in a Tokyo Hostess Club, she says, quote, "Instead of bending to the system, the man finds that the system accommodates him. The woman need not be cajoled, enticed, or consulted. She may simply be taken. The man thus becomes the taker, a position that begets power, masculinity, and pleasure." Now, this is said under the context of a hostess club where the employees are women and the clientele are majority working class salarymen. You know, dudes working dead-end office jobs who want to feel good about themselves as men. But you can easily say the same thing for host clubs where the genders are reversed, because the entire point of this industry is accommodation. Their objective is to appeal to your sense of masculinity or femininity and your desire to be, well, desired.
Good night, girl. I'll see you tomorrow.
And by hyping you up and reassuring you of who you are and what you are, you feel good about yourself and have a higher chance of spending more money and coming back more. But there is a bit of a paradox to host clubs. As the author Anne Allison says again in the same book, quote, "Here is one of the main principles and contradictions of the hostess club as well. Customers pay money to be reconfirmed in some way other than as salary workers or breadwinners, but can only receive this service if they pay money. Since you're the customer, you should be the one technically in charge. But these hosts and hostesses make their money through drink sales and returning customers, which means that the better they are at charming you, the more money they make. In other words, their job is to create just enough emotional intimacy and fun to keep you coming back. So in a roundabout way, they give you the feeling of having the power in a relationship while still holding the real leverage themselves. Now, I'm not saying that the people working these host clubs are like giga-brained master manipulators. Chances are, if you're old enough to go to a host club, you are a consenting adult and know what you're getting yourself into. In my opinion, host and hostess clubs are no different than donating to your favorite live streamer. It's just intimacy under post-capitalism. Pretentious way of saying paying for a parasocial relationship, I know, but I'm a video essayist, what are you gonna do? But even though host and hostess clubs by their nature are nothing sexual, that doesn't mean it's a super clean industry.
を買うっていうよりは時間を買っている感覚なんですよ。金的には10万弱ぐらい。
70だけ僕にこうお金を使ってあげたいかって思うか。
So chances are you can probably see the pitfalls of this sort of industry after just hearing about what they do there, especially when you know how some people can get really attached. And you wouldn't be the first to think this, because the host industry in Japan is heavily regulated for something that isn't NSFW, because the danger doesn't lie in anything physical, but rather financial, because some of the people that go to host clubs can rack up an insane amount of debt. For example, in 2023, a woman in Japan by the name of Yu found herself 25 million yen in debt to a host club after being smitten with one of the male workers there. Yu was a divorced mother of 2, and while it's not mentioned in the article how long ago her divorce was before getting entangled with host clubs, it's safe to assume that it probably played a huge part into her obsession of visiting host clubs and wanting the attention of younger men. Because you don't just walk away from the lengthy process of getting a divorce without having some quarter-life crisis. The dude that she was seeing constantly showered her with praises and even gifts. He played the sounds that Yu wanted to hear. He made her feel like the world, and in turn, Yu wanted more. But eventually, her money ran out, and she had a 25 million yen bar tab to pay. So the host that she was seeing conveniently recommended that she become a woman of the night to pay off her debt. And so she did, and was trafficked not just around Japan, but also to places like Hong Kong and Macau to pay off her debt that was intentionally ballooned by the club itself. And Yu, unfortunately, isn't the only one to suffer this. This is actually a really common tactic by the more sleazy host clubs in Japan, and there are plenty of cases where some women are intentionally debt-trapped by being encouraged to run up the price on their bar tabs. And when said woman obviously can't pay, they're quietly recommended by the host that they were seeing to become things like escorts or work at soaplands in order to pay off their debt. Add on the fact that some host and hostess clubs do have ties to criminal organizations means that it's not just one random scummy club that you had the misfortune of going to for that one night, but a whole system of exploitation. And if it can be this sleazy, why do people go to them in the first place, right? And well, we kinda already answered that. But for the sake of learning, let me expand on it some more. Okay, fun fact, the biggest demographic of women that I found in my research for this topic that go to host clubs aren't forlorn housewives like you from earlier, or naive women who got rizzed up by these BTS looking dudes, but rather women already working in the nightlife industry themselves. And don't take it from me, take it from the people that actually work at the host clubs.
もし僕のお客さんやったら、僕のお客さんは僕を中心に生きてるんですよ。だからお金を作ってくるようなその動きっていうのは全てその風俗で働いたりする全て僕のためにやってるんですよ。だから僕に会いたい、僕のためにこうしてあげたいがためにそういう仕事をしてこう会いに来るっていう。で僕に、会えるだけでも幸せ癒される。
Now, if you didn't know any better, it can seem like a super roundabout thing. You know, women who work adult nightlife industry go to other nightlife industry to feel relief. But to give you guys perspective, here's a quote from a newsletter from the University of Leiden in the Netherlands in an article about host clubs. Quote, "For women, particularly those in the adult entertainment industry, being given a blanket so people can't peek at your underwear is likely to mean a lot to a woman who has spent the evening with a businessman's hand on her thigh. People want what they can't have. A divorced mother goes to a host club to get the attention of younger men to remind her that she still got it. A Japanese salaryman goes to a hostess club to tell himself that women still desire him and that he's as masculine as any other dude. A Japanese woman of the night who's so used to the dirty leering and roughness of her job wants something more slower and personal." Now, this isn't to say host clubs are like the mecca of sincerity and genuineness. Their job is to wring as much money as they can out of you through marked up drink prices. And it was pretty disgusting to hear the callousness from the hosts in the documentary that you see on screen. These guys pretty much just say, yeah, these women are kinda emotionally messed up, and spending so much at a host club is probably not helping their situation as women of the night. But I look good doing it though, and I'm fucking rich. But I hope it does give you some idea on why some people would go to these clubs in the first place. It's basically just a commodified form of love with its sole focus on you. And when you're love struck or love starved, the smallest amount of attention can be the source of brand new obsession. But even though host clubs are a very controversial thing, and there's a lot to say about the emotional exploitation that goes on in those kinds of places, they actually have huge representation in anime and manga. I'm not joking when I say that there are plenty of anime plotlines that are either about host clubs directly or have their characters working in a host type situation, to the point where you have most definitely seen a host club way before this video.
Since you have no money, you can pay with your body. That means starting today, you're the host club's dog.
So you would think that an adult-ish industry like host or hostess clubs wouldn't have a lot of representation in anime and manga, but you'd be wrong. It's actually a fairly common narrative and character trope, and even though we've established that this industry does have a dark side to it, most often than not in Japanese media, whenever a character works at a host or hostess club, it's treated more like a gag than anything else. I'm not joking when I say it's a super common trope in anime and manga to have the MC's mom be super hot, and everyone is surprised when they find out that they work at a hostess club. Again, if you go out and search for it, you will find this trope. But as for specific anime examples, obviously you've got shows like Ouran High School Host Club, which alongside a mortal reminder of how old I'm getting, is a very sanitized take on the whole host club industry. The main character actually owes a debt to her school's host club, which she has to work off by working at the host club itself. And that's about it in terms of the anime acknowledging the exploitation that the host club industry has. It's more of a comedic take on being at a host club. But comedy doesn't sell on YouTube, negativity does. I need a negative slant for this video so it does well in the algorithm, and so that live streamers have something to react to because of how shocking it is. So, to bring the mood down, and my algorithm numbers up, another piece of media that deals with the host club industry is the anthology manga, Tomorrow I'll Be Someone's Girlfriend. I technically already mentioned this in my Jidaike video, but I didn't really get to go too deep into it. It's an anthology manga, so it doesn't really focus on one character for too long, but one of the characters that the manga does focus on is on the girl by the name of Yua. She's a runaway kid that works at a hostess bar in Kabukicho, which is the notorious red light district in Tokyo. And through her eyes, you get to see just how exploitative the host club industry is. And as someone who had to go through the manga again for this video, it was pretty surreal seeing some of the more borderline scammy practices that I've had to read about happen on paper. You can tell that the mangaka probably had a lot of experience themselves when it came to host clubs. For example, there's a character named Moe-chan that follows Yua to these host clubs, and while Moe-chan initially is very much not interested in the guys there, eventually there is one that piques her interest, a host by the name of Kaede. And here you get to see Moe-chan's descent into obsession. It starts off with a simple meet cute. They like each other's company, they're vibing with each other, only for Kaede having to leave Moe-chan to entertain a different client. Suddenly, Moe-chan is worried, because the one dude that made her feel special and that she thinks she sees something in her is now seeing someone else. And with Moe-chan having her own insecurities as a woman, she starts to crave the attention and affirmations that Kaede gives her. And you might say that she caught feelings fairly fast here, but the thing is, one, I'm not trying to spoil major plot points because this manga is well worth your time reading, and two, remember what I said about people going to host clubs to be reaffirmed of their own feminineness? Moe-chan wants Kaede to reaffirm hers. When she finds someone that sees her beyond her looks, she wants more. And to do this, she starts ordering more expensive alcohol. And she's even willing to lie to her own parents to cover the cost, saying to them that she needs more money for college. She even thinks of getting another temp job on top of the one that she already has. But none of this dissuades her from wanting to see Kaede and wanting to prove her love to him and to gain his attention. And ultimately, with costs from nightly visits mounting and money steadily decreasing, Moe-chan eventually takes on a job as an escort to cover the costs of the love she thinks she's getting. And I hope I did her story arc justice to this small description, because her story was really fucking sad. It's paced in such a way that there's a feeling of rising dread as you see her sinking deeper into obsession, and you, the reader, can already tell where it's gonna go, so you feel helpless as Moe-chan takes more and more drastic measures to get validation from this random guy. Seeing her go from insecure but at least surrounded by friends that genuinely care for her, to still insecure but now working as an escort standing alone in the crowded Tokyo street as she waits her first client, is very striking imagery. But I don't want to be reductive and end this video with me going, and this is why everyone in Japan is lonely and miserable, because that's not the point. There are people that go to host clubs purely for the fun of it and aren't constantly being manipulated. Again, the people that work at these places aren't some sigma-brained master manipulator. I just think it's the same thing as when people rely rely on streamers and influencers as their only social outlet. These kinds of clubs don't need everyone who walks through their doors to be lonely people looking for company and affirmations. They just need the few, in the same way that streamers don't need everyone who watches them to donate, but only need the few who can consistently. And while for most people it is just harmless fun, for the small few others, it can be something a lot harder to walk away from. Because the moment you start depending on something artificial to feel real, that's when it stops being a choice. It's no longer about how you can live with your loneliness, but if you can live with yourself, going back to it.